So
Here we go.
powered voices. We kind of been talking about it already.
Yeah, and just autonomy and women's health, I think.
Welcome to Delivered, where we deliver mothers, midwives, and magic. I'm Jazmyne.
I'm Sherry. I'm Erica.
Welcome. It's finally March. We're in
Honey.
March. We're in March and
Oh, yeah.
all these sites. I know. So today we're exploring the intersections of healthcare, reproductive rights, mental health, and spiritual peace. That's just our month's tagline, what we're going to be getting into. This is our third month doing this. We've been doing this for 3 months, 2 months, and then we're going into our third month. Just like rounding about what we're all about, why we're midwives, why we really enjoy this work, right? Why we enjoy sitting together and talking to each other about why we love this stuff. And I mean, we did the Black History episode last week, and that really brought it home for me. It was this new space that I hadn't explored before, and it really did spark something more in me about legacy and what that really means to me, having 2 daughters, being a midwife, seeing the trajectory that I'm on and what I can provide for my kids, and then even empowering families to do whatever they want to do when it comes to giving birth and going back to this really tribal space, right? One of my favorite parts was the birth fire and using herbs. We made salve this week, and that was so fun. Just having my hands in oil, and she was like glowing. It felt so good to have found this part of who I already am, knowing that it's already a part of me. And then
You took to it like so easy.
and then just like really dig in and jump in. And so I'm a midwife, I'm a doula, I'm a breastfeeding counselor, I'm a placenta encapsulation specialist, I'm a yogi, I'm a yoga teacher. And so having all of that in the realm of birth really means a whole lot to me. It's special. It means something in here. It makes me go boom, boom. So I do. It really does.
There we go. There's the t-shirt. Right there. Makes me go boom, boom.
Go boom, boom.
I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you guys? Just bringing it back around. Like, you guys have been doing this for longer than I. What does it mean for you guys?
Well, I feel like what I like about us kind of starting to talk about like autonomy and where this goes is I think it just follows current events really well. As a woman, most of us have our ear to the ground or TV or trying to find out what's happening in the world. Where are we losing our rights? Because we were over here fighting to do better. And now we're like, oh my gosh. So I feel like getting into really talking about women's health, autonomy, and the mental wellness piece to it is really, really important because it's interesting. I try to be careful and not share stories of clients currently under my care, but we had a client come in last week, and they when they came in, there's a quiz we have in our workbook that says, what are your beliefs about birth? It's a basic quiz. It helps me know where they're at. My goal is that it allows the couple to know where each other are at, right? It opens up dialogues. I've always really appreciated it. I have this one client I'm always trying to pull something out of. And when I was like, did you take the quiz? She's like, yeah, we saw it. Like, I was like, well, what did you feel? She's like, this isn't a spiritual thing for me. I'm just having a baby. And I just had a moment where I went, okay, you think you're not telling me anything, but you just told me everything.
That's everything you need to know
Yeah.
right there.
Because in an attempt to conceal your feelings from me,
You're like an
revealed all
open
your
book.
feelings
Yep.
to me. Now I know what we're working with. Now I know there's maybe some deeper things that if she's up for the work, which I've no bias to whether she does that or not, there have all been times in our life where we had that mirror held up before us, where we had an opportunity to do the work and we went, nope, I'm not up for it. But those times that we grab it, whether it's because we have a better support team, we're in a better financial position, we have more resources, our health is aligning, our mental headspace feels good, and we go, yeah, we're ready to learn whatever is before me so that I can step into self. And I think we've always kind of talked about that pregnancy is that opening the door into listening to intuition. And so I think until not only do we start recognizing the voice, because many, many women or people identify as women, they've been taught up to listen to that intuition. We've been generations and generations have been told, seek the professionals, seek the professionals. You don't know, you're a lay person, right? even when they refer to midwives as lay midwives, it's not done out of respect. It's done out of basically, you don't have enough
It's
information.
It's a
condescending.
slur.
It's condescending.
A lay person being someone who doesn't, and I wouldn't even refer to a parent as a lay person. Just because you haven't gone through a school program or maintained a certificate doesn't mean you're coming to my office with nothing to offer, nothing to give, nothing to bring to the table. I oftentimes learn as much, if not more, from my clients.
Yeah.
I think that mental wellness piece and doing the work is great. So how do we support women, and what are our own stories? And I think that's what we wanted to do today, was kind of share a couple of personal stories. That story wasn't mine, but certainly an opportunity where somebody's pregnant and believes they can kind of enter it unscathed, untouched, and are going to come out on the other side of motherhood without change. Wouldn't you say parenthood? If you travel back in time, there were some really big life altering moments in my brain. I definitely think building, creating, delivering, raising another whole human feels like a big deal. It would be some of the most transformative things that happen to us. We focus so much on preparing physically, right? Which is important, especially in our sedentary society. But that emotional piece, how do we prepare emotionally so that we can advocate for ourselves? That came up a lot in our nutrition things. How do we advocate? How, as care providers, do we help empower?
I think it's hard though, because in what you were saying, I remember going back many, many years when I was first a brand new doula, and it was a woman I was working with at the time who was having her first baby. And, a doula, I've gone through all this training, and I asked her, I was like, well, what is it, you want to get out of birth? Like, what do you want out of this? Like, what does your journey look like? And I'll never forget. We were in the break room, and she literally looked at me. She goes, I'm having a baby.
I want to have the baby.
That's my plan. I plan to have a baby.
Yeah.
And as a new doula, that was very eye-opening to me. I was like, oh, because I don't feel like they prepare you for comments like that when you're going through your doula training.
Right.
Because I feel like they tell you, oh, you're going to get these women, because women are going to seek you out and they're going to be excited and tell you what they want and how they want their journey to look, even though we can't set anything in stone. But this person, I plan on having a baby. That's what I plan on doing. I remember she had her baby here. She had her baby at St. Rose. They allowed her to labor for like 2 hours, and then they took her back for a section because they saw an opportunity where someone was uneducated, didn't know any better, didn't know how to advocate for themselves. And I remember, she's like, oh, yeah, they told me the baby's heart rate was really bad, so we had to have a C-section after 2 hours of labor. And like, really? Okay.
Which could be true.
Sure. But not with what she was telling me. I was a brand spanking new doula. So what I knew could fit on the head of a pin with scads of room left over. But I knew enough where I was like, oh, lack of education.
I've also seen some of the women who have invested the most, taken the most classes, done the most work, was so invested and committed to the home birth, end up in transport and C-section, right? And that's always mind-blowing, because the message you're receiving is, yeah, having a baby at home isn't the hardest thing that you can do.
It's like going to the hospital and making these really tough decisions. That's really tough. When you have somebody who is hyper-focused on all of this information, things don't necessarily go the way they want at home. And we end up at the hospital, they feel like they have these really big choices to make. And they do. There are really big choices to make, but all of the information can be crippling to have all this information and overwhelming.
And they're just throwing it at you.
You can remember things. Like, I know for me, when I read in a book, I also created stories in my mind. When labor started happening and it wasn't matching the story in my mind, the fear got a little greater. I thought I had gone in with maybe making the unknown more knowable because I had played it out here so many times. And so then when what I was playing out here wasn't coming into fruition, you start panicking.
What am I doing wrong?
I wished I had gone into it with more flexibility, like more like, hey.
I don't think our society allows that, though. Again, I think it goes back to controlling women in healthcare. Why give us flexibility? Because if we're given flexibility, that means we're given autonomy. Autonomy is a big no-no in the hospital setting.
It doesn't work for what they're trying to accomplish.
You walk through those doors and you are at their mercy. I talk to my clients, and especially when I was a doula, okay, I hate to say this, but we're gearing up to do battle. You shouldn't have to go into the birth of your baby feeling like, okay, I'm going to be Brunhilde and let's do this. It should just be this really organic, natural thing. And they don't, I hate saying they don't allow it, but the setting is not conducive to a natural birth. It's just not.
Well, there are certain things that they don't allow. You're absolutely right. You can't have a water birth at any of the hospitals. It's very rare that you will labor in water. We have one room that has a tub in it. I've been in it. I haven't in any of those rooms in any of the hospitals. And I think there's maybe one hospital that has an L&D here that I haven't been to. So there are definitely things they're not allowing. It's not conducive. And I think you're right about stripping away this autonomy, stripping away these choices. It's more conducive to that bottom line.
It goes back to that old documentary, The Business of Being Born. They're ringing the cash register. It's all about ringing the cash register. And the two most expensive beds in the hospital are the ICU and the NICU. Those are the two most expensive beds in the hospital. There is no reason the NICU should be a goal, and I feel like it is. I feel like it's almost an underlying requirement that they have a quota to fill with how many babies get sent to the NICU. It's almost like speeding tickets. Oh, did you guys get your quota today?
Quota. What if there's a C-section? I think they're meeting that, though. I don't think they have to try it.
I think the C-section rate in Southern Nevada is egregious. I believe it is higher than the national average.
It is.
But when you look at O'Callahan, where their C-section rate is what, 15, 16%,
Matches
the national average.
statistics. Right.
But then you have physicians here where they don't like it when you ask what their C-section rate. Well, why do you want to know that for? I want to know if you're in the 40 to 45% range, because what that tells me is out of every 100 women you see, 45 of them are going to have a surgical birth. Isn't that a little alarming? Look, you know what? Maybe that's just me.
What will be alarming to me is the fact that I ask you a question and you ask me why I'm asking you, because this is literally.
What do you have to hide? If this is a fact, this is a fact. What does it matter?
And if I'm going to hire you, if I'm going to sit in your office every week.
But doctors forget that, though. Doctors forget that they have been hired by the patient. And I think doctors forget about that patient Bill of Rights, much like our own government forgets about our Bill of Rights. It kind of gets swept away. Like, oh, it's just over there. You don't have to pay attention to that. You're just going to do what we tell you to do because it's going to be better for you. No, it's not.
When you brought up Business of Being Born, you know what I thought of? Now I feel like I can be so smart, because if a topic comes up, I'm going to go, what is the answer to that? The other day we were talking about who invented the first car, right? We were watching this video on Tesla, and we had a moment where we were like, who did invent the first car? So then we started looking it up, and we were reading about all the different people who were attributed to the invention of the vehicle, and that America didn't actually have a hand in that.
Wasn't it the Italians?
Well, there's arguments. The French are definitely, but they think it was the Germans.
I was going to say the Germans.
They think it was the Germans, and then there's a French contender. Anyways, what brings me back is what Edison did do was he created the assembly line. And in my brain, I thought we were told the assembly line for the cars would create more jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But by creating assembly line, you might have eased the burden of jobs, but you also removed someone's job, right? Because when you're assembly lining it, there's going to be losses. When you went to somebody and they built you a car and they had that investment in the car, now this assembly line doesn't have that same love and care that goes into it. There's corners cut, quality control becomes harder. I think the Business of Being Born exposed the maternity medical care system for trying to assembly line this organic event. And we're not cars. And I don't think we can agree with that. I don't think the medical world would say, we aren't just a number, we aren't just a car. They'd say that at the end of the day. We're just a vehicle going through the assembly line. Some people are okay with that because they've lived their whole lives just being a number, feeling unseen, feeling unheard, disappearing into the mainstream.
Or just tacitly accepting what's being told to them. I met with this woman yesterday about doing work in the Jewish community. She's like, I would never think about having a home birth. And I was like, that's okay. And I think that's because culturally in that community, we're raised, when you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer, like that's what you're going to do. Or you're going to work in finances, banking,
Yeah, yeah.
doctor, or lawyer.
Yeah.
And there's no gray area. It's like, this is what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And then when someone comes along with a different option, it kind of throws a monkey wrench into that. Like, oh, I didn't really think of that. This woman was not thinking about home birth, let alone a midwife. And then we were talking about doulas and
Well, and I
didn't
think
even think
I
about
think
that.
about that when Andy came. We just took on a new staff member, and he does energy work. Love him, Andy. You should check him out. He's really great. He was like, "What is the difference between a doula and a midwife?" And I know we covered that in the first month, but it kind of comes back to this is kind of either new language or dead language.
Yeah, that's coming back.
And so now it's showing up, and people are thinking it's new, it's trendy, and we're kind of like, nah,
Not really.
this has been around for a long time. Doula might not have had a mainstream acceptable term, but there've always been women helping women in labor and birth, right? Midwives have always, whether that was an acceptable term or not, that's always lived. We just maybe didn't give it a title or a name. Do we deserve a title and a name until we become licensed and recognized through a certifying body? And do we need that?
I think the licensure and the certifying bodies are a great avenue. They're a great avenue, but I don't think they make you the professional you want to be.
And I think that's a big piece, right? I would think the legislation piece,
Uh-huh.
how we've talked about pros and cons to that.
And I believe in some kind of legislation, and I'm a minority. There's reasons why I believe in it. But again, I'm a minority, and the women who are for legislation, when I contacted them, had no idea what to do with me. They told me, we don't know what to do with you. You are a weirdo, and we have no idea what to do with you. Because I'm not a CPN. I'm not a CNN. I am what you would call a traditional direct entry midwife. Did I go through the PEP process? I sure did. I sat for the NARM twice. I missed it by a couple of points each time. And I came to the realization that that test didn't make me the midwife I wanted to be. Only I could make me the midwife that I wanted to be. I think most people, when they're interviewing a midwife, they don't care. They just want to know, do you have XYZ training? Can you do certain things? And if they do their due diligence, they'll get the person they want.
I think a lot of that stuff is really important to people. I was consulting with a family and found out that they ended up hiring someone else who is in the same point in our apprenticeship, but they asked different questions, right? I'm sitting with this colleague and we're talking about how things went, and they asked different questions for her. And then for me, I love that she found someone that works for her, but to know that was really important to that family. I didn't know that in our consultation. Knowing that laws are supposed to protect midwives, that's what we're going for. But any law, not just for midwives, but any law, somebody is going to get left out, and it's going to not protect somebody, right? Some group of midwives in this case is going to be the group that gets cast to the side or the law doesn't work for. Which can be
give up. There's gonna be freedoms that you're gonna
There's
have
no
to be
free
willing to
lunch. You're
give
going to
up.
have to
Yeah.
compromise on certain things
Yeah.
and give up certain things.
And
No,
we
I
go
know.
into it and weigh and measure the risk to benefit and the consequences. Like I'm always doing a pro con list. So sometimes it's mine and Adam. Some of it's our biggest fights. He hasn't given me all the information. When I make a decision on the information that I have, and then I find out additional information he had, now I'm pissed because I made a decision based on this right here.
When you
and
needed
you
that other
withheld
piece. Yeah.
this right here, I would have made another decision. You removed my autonomy. And I think that's as simple as it happens in birth.
Yeah.
You gave me just this little bit of information, calling it bias, informed consent, support, whatever you put it underneath. And went, I'm a good care provider because I gave them some information, but without divulging all of the information.
That transparency. Yeah.
You will miss that transparency. And then you made a decision based on this. And then you learn, oh my gosh, I didn't realize by me doing this, that would affect this, this, and this. And maybe the physicians in the hospitals don't have the time to explain those pieces. And I think that's hard to just think about how I see 4 to 6 clients a month, right? I mean, for delivery. So, at any given time, you have a certain caseload, but these humans come to your office. They all want me to know their names, their stories. There have been moments where I all of a sudden go, oh, I don't remember this person's name. Oh, I hate that I'm going to have to need to ask for this again because it doesn't feel good. You want the person caring for you to know the parts about you because if they're the ones keeping you safe, what if they miss something that's important? And I've had clients come to me after being with an OB. I remember one client coming to me because she caught her physician in the hallway of the practice talking about her healthcare, and it embarrassed her and caused her shame. And so then she went, this person doesn't have an interest or an invested interest and they don't see what I need.
That's just also a lack of respect.
Right.
It's just a basic lack of respect and a lack of our human healthcare privacy.
I think
But
it's because you've just systemized it. Because the person you're taking care of, how could you possibly thinking of them as how could you possibly think about like they're someone's daughter, they're someone's mother, they're someone's wife. They have feeling, they have past, they have history, they have experience, and that person comes before you. Some of the things that you are asked to do
would make you think.
I can't do that to another human. So I kind of got to dehumanize you, right? And that's what we talk about with withholding nutrition, you have to pretend this thing in front of you doesn't have feelings. You have to treat it like a number because if it has feelings, how are you going to be? How are you going to do those?
You can't.
I remember being at a birth with my preceptor once, and there was a woman that we had under our care. She suspected a history based on some scarring and scar tissue, but nothing that was admitted in the office. And I remember when it came time to push, the reaction was almost one of somebody being violently accosted. And I remember my preceptor going, grab her leg, hold her leg open.
And you felt like you were assaulting her.
I went in my car after the birth
And cried.
I cried for maybe 2 hours, cried because I felt like I just became a trauma to this person that I had experienced.
You were an accessory to an assault in the hospital.
I knew this midwife. I knew that she was a little more medical. And I have to say, in my practice, we don't do the whole, like, we're going to hold your legs open. Like, if this isn't working for you, go
Let's move.
squat, go to a
Change
room where we're
position.
not watching you. Like, whatever you need, we'll do.
Yeah.
But I think my preceptor coming from this medical world, it was, you have to make this happen. So it was just with the lack of knowledge or the brainwashing or indoctrination that happens there.
I think we also have to take that into account too. I think generationally, things are changing. I really believe that. I think things are changing. I think
Things are being exposed.
I'm going to rephrase that. I think things are changing both in a positive and a negative way. I feel like it's more of a fight than it ever was in the hospital setting. I don't know if that's because when I go in now with my clients, it's because I am in that midwife role instead of the doula role, but I do feel like families are having just so much more turmoil in the hospital to get what they want, even just to get a placenta released. Once upon a time, all it used to be was you would sign a piece of paper and they would grudgingly hand it to you, but it wasn't a thing. And now it seems like, and I'm just using that one thing as an example. I just feel like there's more of, like I said before, you're gearing up to do battle. I think the positive side of that is families are going in more educated. And I do feel like that has to do with our birth community pumping education
Size and number.
So I think it's a positive for the families, but I think in some instances it's also a negative. It's like a double-edged sword. There's no free lunch. Something is always
Going to be given. I want to share this. I'm on the cusp of not sharing because I feel like it's going to really put me out there and make me super vulnerable. But we talked about transports, right? And how we saw that our clients get better care. I think if I was truly honest with myself, I think the real reason I stopped going is I couldn't witness what happened when I got there. And I feel shame because I feel like I'm abandoning them. But I was going to have to stop doing this because I reached a point of probably, it was a big piece of my burnout. When you invested all this time and energy, going to the hospital was the better choice, possibly. But I think what I've witnessed there hasn't healed my trauma. It's shown up for me. I know it's a shortcoming I bring to the table, that I don't have the ability to set aside enough of my perception of things that I can walk with a woman into a hospital right now to have a baby. I couldn't do it. Even if a loved one called and said, could you doula me through a hospital experience? I would say, I don't think I want to be there for you, but I
that's
don't
okay.
think I'm the best person for you, because I go into shock when I go there. I just check out. Self-preservation.
I think that's what happens when you get to a certain point. We were talking about this before
Mhm.
you got here. I think that happens to a certain extent because I know I just had a conversation yesterday with a client. In the event we have to go, and she has a doula. She said, I will go in, I will get you settled, I will make sure they have everything they need. If I have to talk to the on call, I will talk to the on call, but then I'm leaving. I'm honest with clients about that because I feel like the times I have stayed, it hasn't been helpful.
I
And
agree
to
with
and
that.
to build on
Yes.
what you said, we don't talk about this, but I'm going to say this. Your birth team has trauma, okay? Your birth team has trauma. Maybe not from your birth, but we've been to thousands of births. So
Including our own personal experience.
if you think we don't have trauma, believe me, we have trauma. So sometimes, like Sherry was saying, she does not have the capacity to go into a hospital and serve her client. As a client, I respect that. Like, I respect that that is out of your control. And you can't handle that. But again, that's why we encourage clients to hire doulas, because as a doula, you know what's going on in the hospital. You were saying before, you can switch gears. It's
Yeah.
a lot easier for you.
Without,
And
yeah.
I was saying, yeah, I can't do that anymore. It's really, really hard to do that. But to circle back, we all come with our own trauma and we have learned how to compartmentalize that trauma. We can take something that's happening in front of us, and if it triggers us, or at least for me, I can put it over here. But I can tell you there have been births I have left and I've gone and sat in my car and cried. I remember leaving a hospital birth once and calling a woman who's no longer here. She moved out of state, but I called Sarah. And that woman, God bless her, she sat on the phone with me for 90 minutes while I just sobbed because of what the hospital team did to this particular client. The client was fine. It was all me. So again, to go back to this trauma thing, your birth team
I think we've
has
witnessed
trauma.
it. We knew statistically about physicians that help us out. They have a 7-year shelf life because after a while, you just can't do it anymore. You have to step into this other mode. I think I just hit that burnout place where I realized I would leave those experiences. And in my mind, I think a transport doula is the solution. I think we create transport doulas that have relationships with all of the local hospitals and that they're there to greet midwife family at the door, say, I'm going
I
to
got
take over
this.
now.
I got
I'm
this.
going to advocate. I know what you've been going through. The midwife can give report. Don't do it, nurse, because the nurses, they're already not working for you.
Right.
Saying, we meet them at the hospital parking lot. We have a conversation. We hand off care. Continuity maintains, because that transport doula is not burnout. They haven't been at that birth for
They're
48
fresh.
hours.
Yes.
They're fresh and ready to advocate for that woman. And I think there's an entire base for that as a career that would be super beneficial to every midwife collective, whether you run your own private practice.
That's a great idea.
Could you imagine being a single practicing midwife and having to manage a thing where I couldn't call one of you or a doula to go, I've been at this birth forever. Can you help me out? How about in those places where there's just that one midwife? If you could have someone
But
greet you
even
at
when
the
you are
hospital,
in a partnership, it doesn't always work out that way. I
not
can speak
perfect.
from personal experience. There were times it was just like, you know what? It is easier just to go by myself. But we shouldn't be doing that. We should not be doing that.
Bringing it back to the medical piece, if they're assembly lining birth,
Mhm.
women who are advocating for women, right? And I know there's some male midwives out there. I'm not sure about male doulas.
There's a
There
huge
there are male
movement
doulas.
right now about
Because
dad
that'd be
doulas
cool.
particularly.
Mhm.
I
I have
honestly,
mixed feelings.
I don't,
Do
but
you really want some guy standing at your vagina
Right,
while
right,
you're
right.
pushing the
that's the
baby
thing,
out?
just because coming from this really traditional space, I do think there were women assisting women, right? That's where
I think
that
postpartum doulas, men, I think that's a great idea, is really more of a niche for men. Because I know that as a woman, there's no way I would have ever hired, well, I don't think I
a
would have
male
yeah, my
doula.
husband would have had issues with that. Like, "Why is this guy in the room?"
And I just think that as women, we have so much trauma around sexual trauma,
We come back to that word, trauma.
around men.
Mhm.
Talking to a potential client last week, and she's like, I don't want a male doctor. And her partner was just like, well, that's something you have to get over. And I had to bring it back. I was like, no, that's
No.
valid. I don't know what you went through. I don't know
But we will
what
help
happened
find
to
you
you.
a
I
female
was like,
provider.
but we'll do this together. She had to cry a little bit because she's like, something happened. Like I said, I don't know what happened, but something happened for her to say, I definitely don't want that. So that's why I have mixed feelings about the daddy doula and the men do. I think it's different when the partner is like, okay, I want to be your birth partner and I want to be a part of this.
That's a whole different
I'm a male doula. And I think you do have to have a birthing person who doesn't have trauma with men.
maybe someone transitioning from male to female would feel comfortable having a male
Perhaps.
do that. But I think that most of us who were born physiologically women and have remained women, there is
A
trauma.
lot of fun.
Having a baby is organic and primal. We go into a primal state, push out a baby. So
I
who's
think
not
this
your
is a
partner?
good segue into bringing up reproductive rights. I know that's kind of a hot topic, but like talking about men in that arena, right? I think a good part to jump into from that is how can male or male identifying humans support humans that are female fighting for their rights, fighting for their right to labor as they want or labor with access to certain health care, whether that be abortion, contraception, you know, what could we tell men? How do they support us in that endeavor?
Ooh. You
That-
have to
that's a big one.
allow a woman her autonomy. Because I think the reason that a lot of females have trauma around males is because their autonomy was stripped away, whether that's in a sexual assault situation, going to the hospital, but even being married to someone and not feeling like you have all of the choices that you want. It's because your autonomy is being stripped away. And so you get this negative vibe from this male partner. I think the advice that we could give is that autonomy has to live there. You have to give these choices because that's what scares us, that we won't have the choice to make. Whether I want to leave, whether I want to say this is for me, that's what's stripped away. So if we could leave that piece, I think that's the advice that we give.
How do we not live in a space of fear and scarcity and that we won't have access? How, with everything happening in the world internationally for women's rights, how do we not live in fear? How do we remove ourselves from that so we can approach it in healthier ways to hold each other up, to raise each other up, to raise, I think, how do we advocate for one another? I think we don't even know we're on the same team right now.
I don't think we like each other. Honestly, I think women as a group right now don't like each other. That's what I feel on social media. Everyone is so nasty and so mean. And I feel it's bleeding over into everything. I just feel like there's so much ugliness. We don't know how to get past it.
For me, when you say we don't like each other, what we're really saying is we don't like ourselves, right? And so why don't we like ourselves right now? Like universally, I feel some level of disappointment that I've allowed things to go this far in my life, right? So I look back and I go, "Oh, why was I part of the problem? Why didn't I advocate for self? Why didn't I support that human who was advocating or stepped into the arena? Why didn't I hold that fellow sister up in her endeavor? Why did I feel competitive? Why did I feel those emotions? Until women in general, those identifying as women, I feel like if we can't agree to be on the same team, we'll continue to feel divided. And how will we move forward? This is what the men do well. They know they're on the same team. They know how sports
Well,
works.
I think we're
They
always
know how this looks. They know how to play the game.
I think we're always second guessing ourselves.
And doesn't that stem?
It stems from our patriarchal and misogynistic society.
It's societal.
It is
It really is.
absolutely
At
societal.
core, it really
Men
is.
want us pitting ourselves against each other because if we're not united, we're divided. And that's what they want. That's really what
And
they
when we're
want.
united,
That's a problem.
look at what we
That's a problem.
accomplished.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Problem.
Because there's and I think that's hard to have conversations, even like with my husband, like, because I don't know how to articulate this in a way where he is able to receive, but he has to be doing the work. So if he's not doing the work and he's not in a position to receive, like as a woman, this is my concern with current events. This is what your daughter's concerns are with current events. We have to be able to talk to each other as well as our counterparts. And we have to realize we're all on the side of humanity, right? We go into this because we have gone without before. We've had to fight to be where we are before. So we know what it feels like to not sit at the table.
It's like musical chairs. They keep taking away a chair.
I needed a reminder of what our place was and who decided what our place was.
And don't forget, we just got the ability to
felt
have our
like
own
that
checking
too.
accounts in the early 70s.
Yeah.
We just got the ability to have our own credit accounts in the mid 70s.
Yes.
Enough, what, 40 years?
Oh,
50,
honey.
40, 50 years?
What I
Longer
was
than
doing,
that.
What I was doing, and I know this had to do more with Black History Month, but that cute little gal who went to the first school, all white
Ruby
school.
Bridges?
Ruby
Yes.
Bridges.
Like she's 74. She's alive. She looks amazing. And you go, it
That was
feels like a
yesterday.
long time ago, but it just happened. And so it feels fresh, I think, for those of us who've experienced that oppression. It feels so like it could happen again.
We're only 80 years from the end of World War II.
And I think the other piece is what stories have been chosen to tell through our public education system, not only Black, Brown, Asian, immigrants, but where are the stories of the women, right? You hear about a handful of women. All of a sudden, they start coming out with books celebrating women when I was having kids. When I was having kids, we would run to the library because there's a book out that talks about the 5 most celebrated women.
That's why the American Girl books were so popular in the early 80s. They were written just for girls. They were strong girls who had conviction, believed in themselves, and would put themselves out there.
And weren't just domesticated.
And weren't just domesticated. And
in
they
a very nice way. I have
Well,
mixed feelings about that. I feel like that.
I think the early books,
watered
see,
down.
here's the thing. They're not the same as the books that come out now. When it was owned by the Pleasant Company, it was a whole different company. I stopped buying, my kids were also bigger, but I stopped buying American Girl as soon as she sold that company. I was done. I knew the whole tone was going to change and it was going to become watered down. I didn't want that. One of my favorite American Girl stories is Addie. I love Addie. I have an Addie doll. I have all of Addie's books.
Yeah.
It talks about slavery from a child's perspective.
For sure.
But it talks about important things. The Native American girl, that's another one. Or the Hispanic girl, Josefina. I really feel like there was a point.
And we owned all of those. There were several books.
But we don't have
series
those
that came out. But
anymore.
that was when I was raising children. But I'm talking like when I went to school in the 70s and 80s, what did I see that looked like me that wasn't pregnant in the kitchen?
The books I related to when I was like 10, so like in the 70s. I was 10 in 1975. But all the Judy Blume books, even though Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing was about a little boy, I could
Judy
relate.
Blume, Beverly Cleary did some great things. We should definitely honor those.
I
in
think
every
that there
generation has
are
spoken for us.
Yes, but I
think
think now
you're right.
everything is watered down.
You're right.
Because we're trying to pander to every single community. You can't do that.
Each community should be the one speaking
for themselves.
That's
exactly. And I think that's the problem.
We're trying to tell other people's stories, and I don't think
We
that
can't.
works well.
The
when we
Native
tell
American
everybody else's
community should
story.
be telling their stories. The Black community should be
So
telling their
how do we support that?
I think we just have to keep talking about it. And as annoyed as people are going to get,
Because I think about advocacy and I think of the fear of confrontation as a woman and not wanting to be difficult. And I remember I had no problem breastfeeding in public, but I was like covered with a blanket. That was already pushing things. I'm going to tell you, like, I go to my parents' house, breastfeed with a blanket over me.
Mhm.
Uncles would leave the room. That was like, that was the generation I came from. When my daughter breastfed,
Nobody cared.
she didn't care at all. She gave two shits. We'd be out at a restaurant. She'd whip her boob out, start eating a kid. I'm telling you, at heart, I had this fear and waiting for someone to come up, say something, someone to give us the
You
evil
were
eye,
gearing up to do
having
battle.
a confrontation.
Mhm.
Was I going to support my daughter or was I going to cover my daughter? Which way did I feel strong enough to go? Was I going to give her strength? When my husband comes to me and says, how do I show you support as a woman who is afraid of losing these rights? How do I show you support? And I think, gosh, I'm also working through that. Also working on that. And we have to be looking to other women who are doing it.
You have to go digging and look for it. And I did that yesterday. I was
Sure.
like, oh, I need to
Where
find out
can we
about
help? What's
And
happening in the local
it
community?
freaked me out enough where I'm like, oh no, I will become a spearheading suffragette.
You bring up a good point because you're politicking, right? What is the difference between human rights and politicking?
Human
Perception.
rights is revolutionary because when we're thinking about what you're supporting, right? Politics is what is going to serve the patriarchy. And this misogynistic society we live in, human rights is the complete opposite of that. Like completely, whether it's women's rights, whether it's
Animal rights,
whatever,
children's rights.
it's the complete opposite.
And see, I find that interesting because I would believe that and agree with that 100%. So why are we being told that we are talking human rights and that we're politicking?
But who's telling us this?
When Adam got called into the bishopric, I was posting all kinds of stuff about human rights on my page from a midwifery standpoint. It was very specific about humans and the lack of resources, the lack of equality, the lack of. And when Adam got called into the bishopric, I got called in 3 times and had been talked to by different leaders, male leaders in the church that were saying, you have to stop posting that stuff on your Facebook page. You have to support your husband. And I was like, what am I putting on my page? That's problematic. And they're like, you're putting politics up there. And I went, I don't see it that way. I see this as human rights. And they said, no. I'm sitting there looking, going, was I told just to be quiet? Did I just get shoved?
You were? Yeah. You were told to be quiet.
And so I have a decision here, right? Do I quiet down, support my husband, be a dutiful wife? Do I keep speaking my voice?
You speak your truth.
I mean, I think it's about just asking more questions because how is me posting about human rights going against my husband? How is that going against what we believe in as a religious community? When you ask those questions, you go a little deeper and you get
the real answers.
You get the real answers. You get to the bottom of it.
Because usually it has nothing to do with religion or spirituality, about control.
I was going to say, that's the thing.
It's all about control.
Which is the autonomy piece we are fighting for, right?
Even in religion, that autonomy, you have to have fear. And when you take away somebody's choices, they have fear. You take away that autonomy.
So how do we not live in that fear?
Keep talking about it. If we stop talking about it, they win.
Is action that speaking brings action. I'm watching the world and there are things being done on our local level. It's finding the grassroots organizations. The grassroots organizations, like we talked like before, find out those grassroots situations. Find circles of women that are gathering.
Where you don't feel like you have to constantly defend or explain yourself.
Come to a deeper understanding. Because maybe I was afraid of it because I didn't understand it. Sometimes I don't understand something, so I have fear of it. But then when I do the work, I volunteer at the soup kitchen. I show up at the LGBT community downtown or wherever I'm volunteering in these areas. I'm learning about those communities, have less fear. And then I go, oh, okay, this thing I was kind of scared that would affect me or my loved ones. Now I know more about it, so I can make a better, more intelligent decision.
I think as marginalized communities too, there is this fear of people who may be against you. So when you find someone who doesn't understand your struggle or what your people have been through. It's like, well, fuck that. We don't want to, and it's not our job to
It's
have
not
these conversations.
It's exhausting.
It is, but I do think that there's space for that. There has to be space where we come and sit down and we go, this is what I believe. Well, this is what I believe. How does it clash? How is it
We both exist in the same
in the same
world
space
without hurting each other.
There has to be the willingness to do that. No, I don't want to explain to you why this works and this doesn't for me. But I think that there can be space where we sit down and say, this is what works for me, what works for you, and disagree and be all right.
A lot of time we used to be able to
So
agree to disagree.
That space has to exist. It has to.
It did once upon a time. I just think we need to find it again.
Mm.
And I think that that's kind of
For
what's
me,
hard.
I think it's about getting better, more education. It's just like preparing for childbirth, creating a team of support, doing their own personal work so that you can show up in a space. And this is like ultimately all the issues I have with my marriage. I've always kind of like, I've said to him recently, I wish my feelings were just something that I was working on and going through, and that you were healthy enough in your belief systems that you could just be a support to me and my feelings, and that everything wasn't taken so personally. And I think that happens for women a lot because we're more emotional, or at least we've been told so by society. And so sometimes it's easier to dismiss us. But for me, this desire to be heard or to help other women feel heard means I have to do the work, and I have to show others how it's done, because I just think we have to remember people are watching us. They're watching what we put on our socials. In my brain,
I think about that a lot, actually.
how I walked away from that experience is I thought, well, are my Facebook posts or social media posts for my husband and the bishopric and the church organization, or are they for marginalized people? So is it more important for me to be seen by marginalized individuals that I might be a safe space, or is it more important for me to cater to someone else's agenda? So I think that's like we talked about before, like looking like, did this align with my goal? We talked about that, about your midwifery path, right?
Yeah.
Does this align with my goal? Is this decision I'm making right now align with my goal? So for me, you're right. In my social media posts, I don't need to talk to fellow white people. I already know how all of you white people feel. I'm not just always going to talk to the choir, right? I want to talk to people who are doing this. I want to talk to people who are doing this. I want people to talk to people who look like this. I want to see what is going on in all of these departments. I have nothing to fear because they're just doing what's best for them. And I'm going to hold them up in their spaces so that we can all collectively there.
I think we lose sight of that because we get so caught up in being everything for everybody,
And needing it to be the right thing.
and it doesn't work like that.
I think the medical profession needs to not feel like they're doing something wrong, because they are the predators. They are.
You're either the victim or the assailant is coming back.
Yeah.
If you're the assailant, that doesn't feel very good. That doesn't feel very nice. So
No.
is there a way we can communicate with them? Because if they go, oh, that doesn't feel good, so we actually don't want to receive anything you have to say because that really didn't make me feel that good. How do you make somebody in the medical profession, or you look at the medical profession?
Well, I think
oh,
it's
how do you make
hard
them come
because
outside of that?
we're coming to them, at least we're trying to come to them from a place of respect and bestowing information, but it's not reciprocated. When we go in, like Jazmyne said before, you had a failed home birth. No, we didn't. As providers, following through with our protocols, we saw that something wasn't right. Home was no longer safe.
Mhm.
It would be so refreshing if we were to come into a hospital with a transport and the on-call doc and the nurses were like, wow, good job. You really made the right decision. Thank you. That way, as providers, we know we can walk through those doors, turn care over to the medical providers inside that building. With a response like that, we can be pretty sure that that particular client, now patient, is going to get the care they need, the compassion they deserve.
Yeah.
But that's not how it works.
Compassion is just taken out of it. Right?
It's like, oh, you had a failed home birth. Do you want an epidural?
This is what I'm thinking. What you said is language matters. When it comes to supporting fellow women, regardless of gender, regardless of bias, how we support women is we have to doing the work so that our language matters, because I called you upset yesterday, and a fellow midwife in the Valley had come to the office to pick something up. Some of the humans I serve are like 3-4 hours away. The conversation went like this. When we were walking out the door, we were talking about how hard it is to drive far to birth. And I said, I know. I had a client out in Seligman. She ended up transporting out of care for IUGR. And part of me had a relief, like, oh my gosh, now I don't have the stress of having to get 2 or 3 hours to a birth. She said, oh, I consulted with them. And I go, oh, okay. She goes, did you offer to do it for less? I go, no. She goes, I told them I was going to do it for my full fee. Did you tell them that? And I went, no, they paid me their full fee. And she goes, well, I told them I was going to charge them a travel fee too. Did you tell them you were going to charge a travel fee? And I'm sitting here
To deter the client from
I never
No, I
understood
go-
this exchange. I thought it was weird.
the client's already had the baby, like it's done. In fact, the partner's other baby was born at our facility with another midwife. So they came back to us for that. I charged them in full. My point being, I thought we were talking about the driving, and now you're making me feel away. And I got in the car and I cried. And then I kept just trying to let it go because I felt so tripped up. The message I received from that, which we're learning, sometimes you take negatives, is she was saying, why would they hire you over me? So it felt like she was trying to figure out why.
What have you got that I
What
don't
have you
have?
got that I don't have? If they, oh, I think I talked to this couple. And I'm like, well, yeah, they consulted with me months ago. They'd had their baby. And she's like, no, no, no. I'm like, great, cool. But I think with the digging, well, did you say you were going to pay your fee in full? And what I wanted to say was, do you think that that's the only way they would hire me over you? Do you know what I mean? That's what that felt like to me.
I remember when we were talking about it.
It felt like to me her needing to feel validated, right? Something in her is insecure and she's feeling away about not getting hired.
That's
But now
not
she's
you.
orally processing out loud, which I've done to people. I'm orally processing my own feelings about how that went down. So in front of me, she's orally processing in her mind, but it's a conversation she probably shouldn't be having.
Not with you.
me. She should be doing the work herself. It doesn't matter why they hired me over her. And all the message you gave to me was, I'm less than you. You now think I'm less than you. You think the only reason people hire me is because I don't charge as much as you, which I charge $100.
I was about to say
less
there's
than her.
$100 difference.
There's
in the
$100
fees. That's
difference.
what I thought.
But for her to go, the only way they would have hired you is if you gave them a discount or you didn't charge them a travel fee. And it was just an interesting breakdown because I went, why do we have such a hard time holding each other up? Like, good for you. I'm glad they found
again,
you. Like the way you talked. I'm
I'm
so glad she found somebody who was a good fit for her. Why does our fear and scarcity mindset kind of
Well,
allow
I had
us to
someone
do
call me. I was telling Jazmyne 2 weeks ago, and I was on the phone with her for like 10 minutes. I knew I was not her person.
that?
So I gave her another midwife's phone number. Now, I need the money, I'm not going to lie, but I also knew that by bending to what she needed and not being my true self as a midwife, it was going to compromise her care and her experience. So I referred her to another midwife who I'm sure she will hire, and she's going to have a great experience. She's going to have the experience that she needs and she wants because it's her baby and it's her pregnancy, and we don't have any business being in that space.
Yeah.
So the fact that that particular midwife pulled you into that space speaks more about
it's
her than
catty.
about you.
Right? I know that, but to me, it's catty, right? And so I think as women, how do we stop being catty with one another? We hold each other. We assume that each other knows what they need. We assume that they're making their decisions because they believe it to be the best thing they need. Probably has nothing to do with you. It's all about ego, right?
That's what it is. Because you said it's about how we speak to one another.
Yes.
I think it's about how we listen. I think it's about how we listen to each other, because I think in this space, if you had, not to say that you did anything wrong, you're processing your emotions or
I get
whatever,
it.
coming into a space where you were like, this woman clearly has some ego shit that she has to deal with on her own, maybe you would have felt differently about it. Maybe you could have saved some time not crying in your car,
Right.
like just because.
But I want to
hearing things
assume
different,
that, right? I want to assume the guilt because it triggers me going, I already think I'm less than, right? So if I'm looking for that external validation,
That's that ego,
that's
right?
where I have to do the healthy bits to myself so
Yeah.
that I go,
Can listen
I
to her.
see your behavior is a reflection of where you're at in your life right now.
But it still feels cruddy.
It
when
held me
someone's
down.
talking
It
to you.
held me down
Absolutely.
a little bit. Just like my post recently where someone said something about me being emotional because I was on my period. You took it like, thank goodness she showed space. So did my sister-in-law. Oh, that person was showing you grace. I was like, oh, I felt dismissed. How we listen does matter because I've never been able to figure out when I'm in it, when I feel good and something bad happens and I'm doing well, I can handle that no problem. I can handle that with grace, smooth, don't lose my temper. If I'm in a bad space, it's hard. When something comes along that I have to handle, it feels harder. And I'm working to figure out what that is. But I think as women, we have to learn the language that is helpful to each other. Because I think I've started doing that, asking myself, is this helpful for me to give this information? Is this going to get me where I ultimately would like to be? Or have I sidetracked us and we're going to waste time because my ego's hurting or is bruised? And so I think we have to see how we're receiving something and what lens we're receiving it through, because I'm receiving it through Sherry's lens. All the interactions I've had over almost 52 years now, I've received through my lens. Everything I receive is through mine. I can show up in a positive way. What sharing with me is received for what it was, which was intentional.
These other experiences that I've had
It's hard.
and sit right here and be present. How hard is it to be like, why is it so hard to be present?
It is hard.
What's that about?
Well, I think because most of the time, I think a lot of us are just in constant breakdown, down and survival mode. Exactly. So we can't really see what's going on. And that's hard. You have all of this chatter going on in your head and like these little things on your shoulder saying, oh, well, you should do this. Or, oh, you should do that. And you have to be able to get rid of all of that. Like, stop talking to me and be quiet. And I've done that out loud. I've had conversations with people that haven't even occurred yet. And I'm working up a head of steam, getting pissed,
Making up stories.
making up shit in my own
in your
head.
mind.
But
100%.
then it's like, Erica, shut the committee down, tell the nurse to shut, and this is never going to, and then usually the conversation never takes place. So I got myself worked up over nothing. And I think a lot of us do that. We're in breakdown, we're in survival, and we can't see the forest for the trees. Unless you are independently wealthy, everybody is in the same boat right now. Like, I was hoping gas was going to come down. I was hoping that eggs wouldn't be $22 a dozen. I was hoping gas was going to come down to under $3 a gallon. Like, none of that is happening. At least I can't speak for anybody else, but for me, I'm constantly like, oh my God, are we going to be okay?
I think we should be supporting each other, even when we don't agree with each other, because I want you to fight for whatever right you think you deserve, and I will fight for my rights.
I think a lot that comes into that is that these people who don't want to have those options have never needed to have those options. They've never needed to say,
And those people are people with penises. Let's be honest.
not even,
Well, more than that.
even
more
if
than
you
that.
think about people who have vaginas who are like, no, abortion should not be on the table. We
Oh,
should not
I
have
think
this
it's
right.
mostly-
I can't understand. Like, I don't understand.
But
that
there's so many things that play into it, though.
That's
It's
what
about
I'm saying.
religion. It's about what their husbands think. All of these different things. And I think it is that they've never had to miscarry and had to go and get a DNC. They've never had to understand the space.
That's exactly what you said. I've never had to be homeless. I've never had to beg for this. So of course I hold some level of bias because I've never needed it. Would I fight for the homeless shelter? Just talking about something that maybe is removed from abortion that is a little bit more relatable.
Yeah.
Saying, I've never needed a homeless shelter, so I don't know how important one is. Or I've never been beaten by my husband. So a safe space for a woman and children to go to get out of that situation. I've never needed that.
Even you can lay the same thing out when we're talking about government assistance. I've never needed that. So no, I'm not going to fight for anybody who does, because that's not the space that I live in. I think in any of the spaces where people are like, no, we don't want this, it's because they haven't had to live in that space.
I think that's really important.
And so it's about empathy too,
True.
right?
Yep.
Empathy is huge too when we're politicking and talking about what should be, what shouldn't be.
And I think that it shows up to see how you feel about it, because I was talking to my daughter on Valentine's Day and we were talking about like, I made the decision that if, whether it's a marginalized group or a victim or an oppressed human, when they come to me and tell their story, I'm just going to choose to believe them, period. And are there situations where you're kind of made to be like a referee to navigate a situation because there's different stories being
Oh, yeah.
told? Comfortable. For me, I have to go at the end of the day, even if the evidence doesn't support what that victim is saying, I would believe them. And to me, I'm always going to side with that. I think sometimes that doesn't always feel fun or fuzzy. And you're not certainly going to be in the majority all the time. Sometimes that's comfortable to be in that, so they place themselves there, And so I think you guys have talked about some really beautiful pieces when it comes to body autonomy, particularly for the female identifying humans from that standpoint of we've had to live our lives this way. And I think that's the piece that's missing for men. They haven't been in situations. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we had an altercation with a neighbor. The neighbor came over to talk to us about building a concrete wall between our properties. And we were saving up to do that. The neighbor needed to come over to say they couldn't afford it and wanted to build a wood wall, a wood fence. And would we pitch in on that? And so they come over to talk to us. And me and my husband are standing together. He talks directly to my husband. And I said, I don't want to waste my money. I would rather wait longer. And he keeps ignoring what I'm saying and just keeps talking to the man. This is my income as well. I contribute to our finances. And my husband didn't know what to do. So he did nothing. Later, if you talk to him, Adam goes, that's the first time in our marriage that I actually felt and saw
You left it.
you be treated less than for being a woman. He goes, all the other times I just wasn't willing to, or I overlooked it. It was the first time where it was just so in my face that I had no choice but to look at that and go, oh my gosh, Sherry's being treated different because she's a woman. And this guy feels a way about her for sure. And it wasn't like he had a relationship with my husband and not with me. All the correspondence we had was the same. Until you've been in a situation. If it happened, my husband would say something. Right. So why wait to come into that? I just think that's the problem. To wait to seek it. That's our job and our responsibility, because we actually get a vote about something that we don't know anything about, or we're afraid it's going to affect us in the long run, or we're afraid something happens that changes us. But I would love to see all humans out there fighting for that body autonomy for women, right? We don't have to lay this out. If you want body autonomy, it means you're allowed to do whatever you want. You're allowed to seek whatever medical care you want, take whatever medications you want, whatever you choose to do. Even if it's something you don't agree with for somebody else, you don't get to selectively come in and go, that I don't want that right, so you don't get that right. To me, how awful is that? I don't want it. I've never had a need for it. Or I maybe should have made that decision and I am feeling some guilt and shame about who I am as a mother. Who knows? Could be so many facets. And so if I don't want it, now I'm going to make sure you don't get it, because it's more important that you think and believe like me than you think and believe like you. And I think that's the important piece, especially when it comes to female bodies, even going to the hospital, advocating for whatever right to healthcare that you got. And I know for us, mostly it's the child care piece. I think that part is the part that's the most beautiful. And for anybody who can kind of shed that and step into that, that's where the freedom and the peace and the fear just dissolve.
Okay, so I'm going to bring it back around to you guys. What's important to you with regards to body autonomy and what we've been talking about in general? Because we do this for you guys, so we want to hear from you and what's important to you, because we want to be able to come back and say, oh, Jane Smith said, and we want to address this. But this is a big topic because it's not just about childbirth. It's about supporting women. And actually, it's about humans having autonomy over their bodies and their decisions. It's not even a male-female issue. It's a human issue.
We find out where we agree, go from there. And I think at the end of the day, we can all agree we deserve body autonomy. We just have to now agree what that looks like. We have to work out those kinks and be willing to have hard conversations, willing to listen, willing to do the personal work. Thank you so much for joining us.
Let us know what you think.
Yeah. We'll continue to deliver mothers, midwives, and magic. Thank you guys so much.
Have a good
Happy day.
night.